Hello, welcome to the Scouted Football Podcast. Euro 2020 has come to a close, an agonising defeat on penalties, as is always the way for England, whose road to the final ultimately ended in despair at Wembley. Commiserations to them, but congratulations to Italy, who are crowned European champions for only the second time. The final clip of the BBC's Euro 2020 montage was that of Leonardo Bonucci staring down the barrel of the camera after Italy's shootout victory, yelling, "It's coming to Rome." Which is, I think, was particularly cutting to English spectators. The circumstances were incredibly cruel for England. 3 missed penalties, now likely the way that this tournament will be remembered. But it shouldn't be that way, and that's the purpose of this episode of the Scouted Pod. Gareth Southgate has led a brave, young, diverse team to the final of a major men's tournament for the first time in 55 years. A team made up of young players, one of the youngest squads at the tournament. And for us, if that isn't a major achievement and a major endorsement of what England is and what England can be, then I don't know what is. I think it's only right, given that this is an English-speaking podcast and much of the listenership are UK-based, that we conduct not a post-mortem, but a celebration of England's Euros campaign, if not for the fans, but for the players themselves. I think they conducted themselves impeccably. They appeared as though they genuinely had a great ride throughout. Many of whom experienced tournament football for the very first time. And thankfully, I'm grateful to say that with me to go over England's Euro 2020 journey and what it meant to follow England at this competition is Orlando from the Chelsea spot. Many of you might remember Orlando on the Scouted Pod previously, talking about various Chelsea players. Hard lines, Orlando. What's the immediate feeling this morning following last night's events?
Well, I think really, I'm not sure if I expected this, but this morning I've been feeling relatively, well, not happy, but I guess proud of how far the team have come and the manner in which they did it. I think, you said there that the tournament will most likely be remembered on those 3 missed penalties, but I think actually it paints a good picture of the sort of general feeling, if not in Europe and in the world, but at least in the country. If you look at the headlines on, even the very worst tabloids, they're all sort of coming together to support the players who missed. No one is being scapegoated. Obviously, you always have the kind of horrible people who will be sending abuse to those players, and obviously that's awful. But I think the general feeling is that everyone is in recognition that a penalty can be missed at any point by any player. And I think, especially given that it was those young ones who missed, I think everybody is really kind of, or at least most people are really rallying behind them. And I think for that you can have a real sense of pride, and especially given what's come before that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the way you put it there in terms of the national newspapers, which in years gone by perhaps would have scapegoated individual players or Gareth Southgate himself. I think the fact that there has been a rallying around the players who missed and the squad in general shows that there has been an element of progress perhaps in that department, and maybe perhaps moving towards a better discourse around the England team, because this has been an England team which many people have been able to get behind. They've been able to identify with. I mentioned in sort of my opener the diversity of this England team. And, you look at the different areas, the different regions which all of these players have come from. There's 3 of the back 4 that started much of the tournament were from Yorkshire. You had Jordan Henderson and Jordan Pickford from the Northeast. Countless players from London and the Northwest. There were, this was an England team. It was the best of what England is. It's people of all backgrounds, all creeds, all races, all religions, and thankfully that played out in the squad. They did seem to get along really well together, and that's something which I think will be, obviously the penalties, as I said, will probably dominate the discourse as time goes on. But I hope it doesn't, because from a neutral perspective, it doesn't feel as though this is the end of England's journey. This feels like it's a minor bump in the road at the beginning, does it not?
Absolutely. And I think especially if you look just in the sort of isolated example of the player who unfortunately missed the deciding penalty, Bukayo Saka, you can look at that, and say, oh, well, he missed the penalty, he knocked England out. But really, if you look at his tournament as a whole, he was someone who was, on the edges of not being selected for the squad at all. He was someone who, when he was selected in the squad, many people said, including myself actually, oh, I doubt he's going to get many minutes, if any. And he's been an absolute revelation. He's been fantastic. He's really captured the hearts of the nation, not just what he does on the pitch, but how he conducts himself off it. He's such a lovable character, and such a great guy too. And I think that really sort of exemplifies the way I feel and the way I hope many other fans feel about this squad. And particularly given the age, I mean, just reading off a list here, obviously you've got Saka, who's 19, you've got Sancho, 21, Reece James, 21, Declan Rice, 22, Foden, 21, Jude Bellingham, 18, Mason Mount, 22, Marcus Rashford, 23. These guys are all so young. I'm not sure whether this was the general feeling before the tournament, but I always thought that it was perhaps a tournament too soon to really be saying, oh, England should be really putting up a big sort of challenge to win this whole thing. And I think given that they have done really well to reach the final at all, and particularly to take it all the way to penalties, I mean, just adding on to those players, there's Trent Alexander-Arnold, 22, who's injured. Same with Mason Greenwood, 19. There are so many other players who haven't even made it into an England senior squad yet, who will do in the future for sure. I think there can be nothing but optimism for the future, particularly with someone like Gareth Southgate at the helm, who I think, well, obviously he had many doubters, but I think pretty much the whole country is now united in that he's a really fantastic leader. And I think, you can say what you like about what he does on the pitch, his tactics. I personally think, setting a team up to do the best it can in tournament football, cup style football, knockout football, where you want to be strongest in defence. I think that is, a perfectly good setup, and I don't have any problems with the way Southgate sets up his team. I don't have any problems with the people who may question him not playing the likes of Grealish and Sancho, but what he does off the pitch, the way he conducts himself, the way he is so sort of certain, sure, defiant in, mainly taking the knee and backing the players and being so well spoken on all sorts of divisive topics. I think he is, I think, even despite what he said a few days ago, which I wasn't too happy with about, England having been threatened with invasion in the past and that contributing to the atmosphere in the stadium during the Germany game. I thought that was a bit iffy, but given everything he has said in the past, and everything I'm sure he will go on to say in the future, I think you can't have any qualms about what a fantastic guy he is.
Yeah, it was discussed that Southgate had the courage of his convictions. That was something, that was a phrase that people kept coming back to, and you're correct, especially with the taking of the knee, standing by his players, saying that this is something which is important to them. This is not just them following the lead. This is they actively want to do this, and I think it took. It took real integrity to stand by his young squad, because he knows what it's like to have been in that position, and obviously the narrative around obviously missed penalties at major tournaments, obviously Euro 96 Southgate, and nobody needs to be reminded of that. But just on the penalty shootout, there's Bukayo Saka, of course, the player to miss the decisive penalty. That came after Marcus Rashford and Jadon Sancho both missed their spot kicks. There isn't really anybody better, I'd say more sensitive or acutely aware of the emotions that those three will be feeling than their England boss, the person who will have been one of the first to come and console them. I think outside of football, you talk about support networks and support bubbles and whatnot. I feel as though this England team has one. It seemed as though, that atmosphere, that there's been no ego, no bravado, nothing like that. At least not that we've seen throughout the past month, and it's been unifying. I think we only need to see sort of the scenes across the country when England have played. People have got behind the team, and in the way that they always do. But this time it felt a little bit more as though the country genuinely thought that this could potentially be the one where 55 years of hurt or whatever it is that come to an end. I do think it was unifying, and that's the overbearing term that I'd use to describe the tournament. But I mean, this is a football podcast, and we're going to talk about the penalties. Of course, I don't want to dwell on it too much, but the decision to put 23-year-old Marcus Rashford, 21-year-old Jadon Sancho, and 19-year-old Bukayo Saka as the third, fourth, and fifth penalty takers. Gareth Southgate has come in for some flack for that, but I'm very much. I mean, this is my own personal opinion, but I'm very much of the opinion that Southgate knew and had prepared as he had for every single game state, every single eventuality. He knew exactly who he was going to go with for his penalties, and that was clearly seen in his substitution on of Sancho and Rashford in the final stages. I know that they barely got a touch of the ball, if any, before they took their penalties. But if he brings them on and they both convert the penalties and Italy's spot kicks go the way that they did, and England end up winning, then it's a masterstroke, and it's one of those things where the variance in penalty taking, the variance in a penalty shootout, the finest of margins between defeat and victory. I think it's very unfair to then portion blame to whether it be Southgate or whether it be to those three players, because there's such a fine line.
No, I completely agree. I think I'm very much of the opinion, no matter how reductive this may seem, that penalties are just really a lottery. And I don't know how much I think experience kind of feeds into that. I think all these players are professional footballers. All these players, throughout their youth career, throughout all the football games they've played in the past, will have taken many penalties. They all know what it's like. As Southgate said, they practice them virtually every day in training. I think really all you can say about this is most of the time you score, this time they didn't score. And that's just how penalties go. I mean, that said, I do think you can take some issue with the decision to put Saka as the fifth penalty taker, especially given that he was the least experienced out of the three young ones who missed, potentially the least experienced in the squad. I don't think he had ever taken a senior penalty before. So I think putting him fifth was, not the best decision from Southgate or from whoever was making that decision. But at the same time, if he's the guy feeling the most confident, which I don't doubt is the truth because we've seen what a sort of ballsy guy he is, if that's the case, then I don't think it's necessarily wrong to give him that, because if you've got someone like Raheem Sterling, who many people are saying was wrong for not stepping up to take a penalty, he has a track record of being bad at penalties at club level, and that is absolutely fine. But I think when you're not good, and especially if that's feeding into you not feeling confident, if you're not feeling confident, it's much better to say, look, I don't feel confident to take, rather than sort of braving through it and then potentially missing because of the fact that you're feeling nervy or whatever. And if Saka, he looked confident as he went up to take the penalty. He took a confident penalty. It wasn't a particularly bad penalty. It was just saved. And that's what happens sometimes. And I think, if he scores it, then people are perhaps lauding Southgate for having the balls to put such a young player in that position. So, yeah, I think ultimately, as I said before, really, this is just the way it goes sometimes. Penalties are a lottery from the first, the first whistle for the first penalty. And I think you really have to try very hard not to overanalyze it, and just to say it was a 50-50 chance or thereabouts from the time the final whistle went after extra time.
Yeah, there's always the element of chance, isn't there? And we can talk about experience and mentality until the cows come home, but you look at the players who missed for Italy. Andrea Bellotti, who is not shy of taking a few penalties. He's scored plenty in his career. Jorginho, of course, the player who scored the decisive penalty to see them through against Spain in the semi-final. Players are capable of missing penalties in pressurized moments, and I think the debate around Raheem Sterling, I think the point you make is an important one, because yes, if he doesn't have a great track record, who's to say that's not in his in the back of his mind, in the front of his mind, as he goes to walk, the long lonesome walk to the penalty spot, to face 6'5" Gianluigi Donnarumma. If there's a player who's more confident, visibly undisturbed by the pressure, then why should Southgate deny that player the right to go and be a hero, without getting all sort of wrapped up in the occasion of it all? But yeah, I think that the fact that lots of people will have had some very choice opinions, and I don't mean, I'm not even referring to the ones which have been absolutely abhorrent. A few people, people will have had choice opinions over the decision to take them, whether a 19-year-old should have been allowed to take it. But at the end of the day, they've never been in a position like you or I to be in front of 65, 70,000 spectators to go and take a penalty which keeps your country in a major final, keeps you in the competition, keeps you fighting. I think it's a completely, it's something which you can't measure, you can't quantify, you can't begin to experience what that must be like. So I think my overriding message would be that I'm very pleased to see that the overriding message from the majority of people has been one of support to the three who missed, and in particular Saka, because it was not an easy thing for them to step up and do that. And as we said earlier, this is only the beginning. This probably won't be the last penalty shootout that England partake in with Saka, Sancho and Rashford. So there's the opportunity for a redemption arc there, and I'm sure there will be an opportunity for that in future. But talking about Southgate, we just discussed him there about his integrity, his courage of his convictions and whatnot. What does he mean to you as an England fan, as a manager? Because in the past there's been the likes of Fabio Capello, Sven-Göran Eriksson, Roy Hodgson. These types of managers, very differing in styles, differing in terms of discipline and personality. What does Gareth Southgate mean to you, as a young English man?
Well, really, what you said there about asking what he means to me as an England fan, I think honestly, before he sort of his manner and his I guess opinions and the way he conveys himself to the media, etc. Before that sort of came to the fore in recent months and maybe the last 12 months or so, my fandom for England was actually decreasing because of Brexit, because of the way things are in this country. I struggle to identify with what supporting England, I guess, as an institution stands for, and really Gareth Southgate, and his squad of players behind him have really given me something to believe in and to support, because I am supporting this team very much primarily because I like them. I like Gareth Southgate. I like what he stands for. I like how he doesn't take any shit. I love how he's defiant in his beliefs. When England, away at, I think, Bulgaria or whatever it was, experienced that horrible racist abuse, he was the first one to come out to the media and defend his players. And there have been all these brilliant stories come out about how supportive of them he was behind the scenes, etc. And I would love to live in a world where that would be the bare minimum for a manager, and we wouldn't have to sit here sort of praising it. But actually, I think there are very few like Southgate in that regard. And it makes you proud as a fan. And the players behind him, they're all so likable. They're so much fun to watch. I just think what Southgate's done is he's built a project where it's very hard not to support them. Particularly if you're someone who perhaps was falling a bit out of touch with what supporting England stands for. I think, well, especially in my case, I think I've very much sort of fallen back in love with that because of Southgate.
Yeah, in a sense, everything sort of it stands and falls with him. He's the pillar behind which this England team play and play for, and ultimately that translates to the fans, as you've just said. Falling back in love with the team. I mean, there's nothing more beautiful in terms of football, because that is what. That is why you support a team, is because you gain a vested interest, and that develops into a deep a passion for that team in particular. In terms of the tournament as a whole, in terms of the young players in particular, you rattled them off earlier from those in the squad who are 23 and under. Who stood out in particular for you in the games which England, dominated up until that final?
I think the first one, we've already talked about him a lot, but it's got to be Saka. Because as I said, not many people expected him to play really any minutes. And I think, first of all, it must be a testament to how he is in training that he's even got into the team ahead of the likes of, Sancho and Grealish, who are fantastic players in their own right. So I think, it seems silly to say, but just getting into the team in the first place is a massive achievement for someone, aged only 19 and not that experienced relative to those two. And then when he did come into the team, he's just been brilliant. I think the thing that stands out for me the most is how sort of unfazed by the pressure he seems to be. He is someone whose greatest strengths lie in his intelligence, his decision making, and stuff like that. And it's hard for that not to be sort of, I guess, warped and distorted by big occasions. And he has clearly handled that really well. And the way he conducts himself on the pitch, he's so tenacious. He's always making the right decisions. Always, he plays it simple if it needs to be simple. He takes on a defender. At 19, he has a really good grasp of sort of when to inject pace into the game, when to slow it down. He knows, he's aware of the crowd in the stadium. I was at the England Germany game at Wembley, and I remember one moment when he could have easily played it back, but he sensed that the crowd were behind him, and he took a defender on. I think he ended up getting tackled, but the crowd gave this massive roar, and that can really kind of change games. And I think he's just a fantastic young man who I absolutely love.
Yeah, as you say, it's a reflection of how much he must have shown in training, how highly the coaching staff think of him, that he was in ahead of the likes of a Sancho or a Grealish, who have been so captivating for Borussia Dortmund and Aston Villa over the past few seasons. Whereas Saka is very much new to the scene, 2019, 2021. He's been slowly building towards a fantastic European Championships performance, and maybe it was maybe a lot of people, as you said earlier, myself included, I thought it was probably a little bit too soon. I said he would be the 26th man in the squad, and he completely proved me wrong, because yes, that Germany game, he was very, very, very good in that game. I thought he was the impetus that he gave England, the drive, the directness, the outlet, was something which proved Southgate's tactical sort of tweak in that game to be justified. And yeah, I'm overall, I'm just very pleased that he's had that experience in his game, and with the network that he has around him, I'm sure that he'll come back stronger from the penalty miss and the overall disappointment of missing out at the final hurdle. So I've been hugely impressed by him. I'd like to say a word on Declan Rice as well, because there was a lot of debate. There was a lot of debate before the tournament around whether it would be Rice, Phillips, Henderson, that sort of trio. And I think the fact that Rice, the debate has raged around Phillips and Henderson, and Phillips has made Henderson's role redundant and whatnot. I'm not entirely sure that's the truth, but Declan Rice has, in effect, over the course of 6 games, along with Phillips, kind of mended the psyche of England supporters, where there was it's too negative if you play both Rice and Phillips. It's too negative. Yet they've shown that it's not. It works. It's not too negative, because it's the direct opposite, because it's got England to a major tournament final, a men's major tournament final, and I just think the energy that he brought, the positional awareness, the constant scanning. I saw a tweet where it said he probably has to put his neck on ice afterwards, because he's just constantly aware of his surroundings, where players are. And I think that massively contributed to how England didn't concede from open play throughout the entire tournament. which itself is a remarkable statistic. You know, the Mikkel Damsgaard free kick and the tap in from Bonucci at the corner in the final being the two goals that England conceded. I just had to say something on Declan Rice because I thought, you know, he's someone who has obviously been dubbed, you know, this £80 million player. Chelsea are going to make bids X, Y, and Z by different transfer gossip columns and whatnot. But he really is a fantastic player, and he's covered himself, you know, in glory throughout the entirety of that competition. I mean, the Germany game where the long lens catches him sort of the other end of the pitch to all the celebrations, and he just falls onto his knees as he's got cramp, and you know. That's exactly the type of, you know, fight that supporters want to see from their players representing their teams, and I think he encapsulated that really well.
Yeah, I think the thing I'd say about Rice is what really most impressed me about him is just the amount of work he gets done, you know, between the two boxes. I mean, and particularly between the two sidelines, actually. He's very, very impressive, sort of circulating out wide. You know, I think that is clear to see in the fact that he was actually brought off around the sort of 70-80 minute mark in most games, looking absolutely shattered. I mean, you mentioned there the Germany game when he was I think he was off the pitch injured when England scored, you know, I think 78th minute or something. And this is, you know, when you consider that he plays almost every minute for West Ham at club level, the amount of ground he covers, and the efficiency with which he covers it too, I think is so impressive. You know, circulating out wide to, I guess, to force the ball back in field, to win it back, to put pressure on the opposition. That's something Phillips did really well, and you know those two worked so well in tandem. One of them going, the other covering the space. I think what we've seen there in a partnership flourishing is, you know, you can give credit to the two as a whole, but you also can give credit to each one individually, because to form a partnership like that takes a lot of, you know, it takes a lot from both individual player. And I think you can really applaud Rice for, well, and Phillips, but obviously Rice is the one we're focusing on because he's within the scouted football criteria as an under 23. He's
yeah, we're not allowed to discuss Phillips,
yeah.
are we?
Well, I mean,
2 years too old.
it is true though. You know,
Oh no,
obviously,
yeah, 100%, yeah.
obviously Phillips, he deserves the credit, but I mean, I guess it's more impressive for Rice at that age to be able to put together a partnership like that, you know, in short such a short period of time. You know, they don't have much time on the training ground. They don't particularly necessarily know each other very well because they don't play together at club level. So I think that is something that you can really applaud.
Absolutely. And I suppose looking to the future then, England kind of, you know, getting to a major final like they have done and being within touching distance of lifting the European Championships trophy at this stage with such a young squad. I think it's 3, 6, 9, 10 of the 26 in that squad were 23 or under. Of course, Saka, Bellingham, both teenagers. You know, Phil Foden, Reece James, 21, Sancho, 21. There is incredible potential in this England squad, and you do envisage England dominating at least one tournament over the next decade, and I'm sure. I'm convinced, in fact, that England will win a major tournament over the next 3 or 4, perhaps. I think this one was an indicator of just how close that they can get without perhaps that, I know it's a buzzword, but that experience, that tournament know-how that perhaps, and this is a big perhaps, that the likes of Bonucci, Chiellini, Verratti, those types of players brought to the table. But I mean, from an England perspective, what's your thoughts on looking ahead to the future? You know, do you envisage England potentially dominating major tournaments like we've seen the likes of Spain in the past, or Germany or France, for example?
Well, I think it's also worth mentioning that, you know, we talk about these young players in the squad and we talk about the likes of, well, Bellingham, Sancho, Reece James, who actually didn't play many minutes at all. But England are still on minutes played. They still have the youngest squad. So not just in terms of, or I think it's the second youngest, but you know, it's very much up there. Not just in, you know, the whole 26-man squad. It's also in the you know, by weighted by minutes played. How, you know, the players who actually got on the pitch. England are are affording those minutes to the youngest out of all the teams at the Euros. Because there are some players, as we mentioned, like Phillips there, who's not that far over 23. And yeah, so looking forward, do I think England will dominate? I'm not so sure about domination, because I think, well, international tournaments are just so variance based and so volatile. And, you can just have one game where you concede 3 long shots and you're out. And I think that makes it very hard to dominate the international scene. I mean, I know Spain did it, I guess, from sort of 2008 to 2012, but I think you can make a point there about their style of play, keeping the ball, and having lots of possession being conducive to that. And I'm not sure whether that will be England's real forte going forward. I think Gareth Southgate, the way he sets up the team, is very clever with regard to how international tournaments are volatile and the way I've just described. I think, he sets them up, as you say, to be so good defensively that they don't concede a goal from open play in the whole tournament. He sets them up in a way that they allow themselves to be somewhat reliant on individual quality in the final third. And I think that is relatively fine in international football. I mean, we've seen with the likes of Raheem Sterling, who I know is out of the scouted football criteria again.
You've done it again.
Older,
You've done it again.
But I have to mention him. I have to. He was the one player who really, really captured my heart more than any. I think he is absolutely fantastic, from how good he is on the pitch, what a talisman he is to how he conducts himself off it. I think he's just brilliant. I love him.
Player of the tournament candidate.
Player of the I think he should have got it. I think it was a terrible cop out to give it to Donnarumma. I mean, he barely touched the ball for half their games.
UEFA have a track record of this, though, don't they? They're not great with the individual awards at the end of tournaments, are they?
No, they're not. I do really feel Sterling should have got it, but I mean, going back to his individual quality shining through in the final third, I think, given that there are these young players in the wings, the likes of Grealish, Sancho, Foden, Rashford, Greenwood, all these players who are going to be in the squads in years to come. If they have some sort of, the likes of Sancho, Rashford, Greenwood, they're all going to have chemistry from playing together at Man United. They're all going to know each other. They are already, you can see all of them good friends. There's that bond that I guess exists from them having played together from such a young age, whether that be in the youth teams or just in their first ever England first team squad. That is going to last. And with that will come a real ability to be dangerous in the final third, despite not necessarily perhaps having that many attacking players on the pitch. And I think that does spell danger for the rest of Europe and the rest of the world, definitely.
I think that's a perfect way of summarising it, really. It's the beginning of something, not the end. That's all from us on the Scouted Football podcast this week. A reaction to England's elimination at Euro 2020 at the hands of Italy in that final. It's one in which England are filled with England fans are filled with pride at their team. They're proud of the young players that have punctuated this tournament and the run to the final. And I think the overbearing feeling is that it's not the end. It's only the beginning of something which these players will have the opportunity to go one better and win a World Cup or a European Championships. And I think that's all analysis, all sentiment, all discourse aside, I think it's something that most people probably on the basis of this past month or so, past 4 weeks, can see is a real possibility. But yes, thank you to Orlando for talking me through what it means to be an England supporter in the immediate aftermath of an agonising penalty shootout defeat. But also for his insights on what it means to fall back in love with the England team, to feel represented, and to feel proud of that team as well. thank you again for coming on, mate.
No, it's been a pleasure. Thank you, Joe.
That's everything from us. In the meantime, please do check out our YouTube channel. We're putting out some more tactics videos on there, as well as some player profiles, some explainers, and as always, there will be new exciting content on scoutedftbl.com for you to read. That's everything from me. I've been Joe Donoghue. This has been the Scouted Football Podcast. Stay safe, take care. Bye for now.